We're in the midst of a huge transformation where our peers, communities, and workplaces are all really melding into one. Welcome to Reimagining Company Culture. My name is Christina Giordano, she, her, and hers, and I am the Senior Partnerships Manager here at AllVoices. Today, I am very excited to welcome our next guest onto the interview series, Rachel Williams. She is the Vice President of People at DermTech. Rachel, thank you so much for being here. If you want to share a little bit about yourself for our listeners, including your pronouns, and when you were younger, do you remember how exactly it answered the question, what do you want to be when you grow up?
Hi, Christina. It's so nice to be here. Thanks for having me on the show. I identify with she and hers. And when I was growing up, I had a lot of answers to that question. What do you want to be when you grow up? I was raised by parents my father was a pastor and an artist, and my mother a teacher. So I always had this question that guided what I want to be is like, how can I best serve the world? And so I started out as the first answer was I wanted to be a veterinarian. At some point then I shifted into more medical field, maybe a physical therapist. I loved Oprah. And so maybe I could be a journalist or a TV host. And, kind of kept on that honest winding path. That bumper sticker, not all who wander are lost. That's sort of my first couple of years, I feel like, in the professional world, where I looked at everything from Peace Corps to corporate work. And I did that toggle back and forth for a bit between nonprofit and corporate, trying to find, that way that I could best serve. I had a great boss in 2005 who said, "Hey, what about HR?" And that was really helpful. She's still a great mentor and good person in my life today. She asked a great question. And so found my way to HR. I got my coaching certification through the International Coach Federation, did a lot of leader development, talent development work early on, and then have grown into broader scope and responsibility to lead the full people function these days.
That's exciting. I appreciate you sharing your journey to this work, kind of the questions you asked yourselves, the role models you had from a foundational perspective too. As kind of vice president of people, when you're thinking about this dynamic thing of company culture, how do you keep a kind of pulse on what's happening in both a qualitative and quantitative way when you're thinking about measuring company culture, especially as more folks join the team and there's internal mobility happening as well at DermTech?
Yeah, I would say there's three ways to answer that question. I'm going to start, I know you said qualitative and quantitative. And before that, this thing called intuition is my first go-to in terms of measuring culture. As a middle child, and then also as a trained coach and facilitator, I'm always listening for and watching just for like what's in the space. And it's a bit of an intuitive exercise, how does it feel to walk into this room? What do I notice is behind what people are saying? What do I notice in their words? What are the words that might get used a lot? It's sort of an intuitive feel for people and for culture. That's sort of my first stop. It's just how I'm wired. I would say qualitatively, one of my favorite ways to go at this is the expectation gap. That's what I would call it, which is to say, what did you, asking three questions. What did you expect when you joined us? And that's like the juicy, exciting, like, oh, when I heard about DermTech, I know you're an innovative company and I wanted to create a new category. I want to, it's all those exciting, promising things that someone wants. And then the second question is, and what are you experiencing now? And it's just like a what is question. And then the third is, and who do you most want us to be? What do you most want to see us grow into? And so qualitatively getting those kinds of answers from people, it illustrates the expectation gap that exists everywhere, no matter what. Very rarely is it fully on par. Sometimes there's a gap of I'm not getting what I wanted. And sometimes it's exceeding, I'm getting more than what I wanted. And that's really interesting and important, I think, to ask often or annually, in a company to kind of pulse qualitatively the culture. I would say quantitatively, there's so many great items that fit into that classic HR or people dashboard. I'm really interested in, what's the percentage of first choice candidates that accept our job offer? Quantitatively, that number tells me, do the people we want us back? Turnover, of course, is important. How many people are choosing to leave the organization? in terms of employee relations issues, quantitatively, how many are instances are coming up, conflicts or things that folks need to speak about with people. I would say those are some of the key metrics that are really important. Number of applicants per job. What is the energy around our employment brand, and how many people are we attracting to our opportunities? Those are a couple big ones quantitatively that I tend to look at.
I love that you added intuition there as well, because you really know kind of how you feel both physically and emotionally when you walk into a physical space or you're on a Zoom call with someone, the tone as well of meetings, and kind of what you talked about just now as well in terms of the energy of that quantitative data too. Providing that context is so important.
Yes. Yeah. For me, it's a big, we need to remember about mirror neurons. Like as humans, we're these gregarious people who just kind of read a space and then you tend to mirror what already exists. So yeah, if I'm new and I walk in, all I need to know about that culture is kind of what I see. And I'm inclined to probably acclimate and mirror what I see. And so we have to be thoughtful. And again, I really want to encourage people. That's a big part of my work, is like to challenge what you see. If it doesn't feel right, if you need something more beyond what exists here, we've got to make sure we're talking about it and tending to it.
Absolutely. You have to be kind of open to challenging things, also kind of questioning and kind of asking yourselves those internal questions too. I'm a huge fan of Esther Perel and love her books and kind of readings there. And I think she says something around the specific example was when you're arguing with someone, it's not only two people in the room, it's like you and all of your experiences with this specific argument, or just, something that it brought up in you as well. And I think this is related to the workplace too, because we can't really silo out what's happening in our life outside of work, inside of work too.
That's right.
And I want to ask kind of what is that relationship between individual wellness, employee wellness, and company culture overall?
I think it's really, it's a full range of emotion I have about how relevant that is right now in the world, and then also in the people function in my space. It's both heartbreaking in a way because it accentuates some pain and some like ways that people have been silently suffering, not speaking up on behalf of their wellness and what they need. That's kind of been accepted to a certain degree in certain environments as a norm of corporate culture. So on the one hand, it's a bummer. And then the other side, again, I see it as just, this is the most exciting time to be in people and in the world because of how much is cracking open and how much we're talking about wellness. I'm inspired by the bravery of someone like Simone Biles, who is speaking up, and she's joined by a couple other folks who have celebrity, have, a name in what they're doing. And they're just saying, I'm not well, and I'm choosing not to do this right now because it's not what's best for me. And it's really having, I think, really good impact on the quality of conversation we're having around this. So I just think it can't be understated, that connection between how am I as a person, how is the wellness of my workforce and the culture, and ultimately the performance of the organization. I tend to think about it like an iceberg, Christina. So it's like, if we choose to have that relationship with our people in a workplace as just transactional, like you're just coming in, just do the work, head down, sort of, I don't care to know if you're really well or if you're not. It's like that 10% of an iceberg, which is visible on the surface. You'll likely get 10% of a person. But if you're willing to like open up the lens to full wellness and someone's full humanity, like how are you, and the extent to which you're thriving is the extent to which we'll thrive as a business. It's kind of what you said about how much a person brings into the conversation or into a relationship. I just think that's the proportion we get from people if we have their hearts and their minds and the essence of who they are, their full wellness. Shoot, that's a huge connection too, and that's the proportion of additional lift we'll get in terms of company culture. And then again, that's company performance, really. So I think it's just enormous, that connection between who we are as people, how we're doing, tending to that, which then drives really organizational performance.
Yeah, and I think the why behind that is really important, and there is a natural connection between that wellness to company wellness to individual wellness and that full humanity as well. And I definitely agree, destigmatizing, talking about mental health and your well-being and opening up with vulnerability is so important. And then there's that next step of actions to take too, right? To have that alignment as well. How do you think about really preventing that moment of burnout and really encourage managers to prevent burnout on their team too?
Yeah, I think of it two ways, I suppose. First, it's putting the responsibility into the hands of each of us as individuals to be our best gauge of that. We have to know first in order to then advocate for and speak up for what we need and make requests in the workplace. So I think it really does start with one of the things I've brought in to DermTech and appreciate about my role in people is a mindfulness practice. I'm a student myself in terms of meditation and bringing that into the workplace. I partner with one of our scientists and colleagues to really welcome that into our space. If we can understand how the human body works, what our stress response is, how that manifests through the workday, we can give individuals the tools to better recognize and then take responsibility and action for what they need. So that would be the first stop. And then I think, in terms of just the tools and ways of being with people at work, it's just really reminding people that, it's like a car. Preventative maintenance is a really big deal. If you wait until that last juncture where, the brakes are out and you've got that flat tire, you're just careening down a hill. It's really hard to come back from that, to recover. I've experienced burnout myself before personally, and it takes a bit of rebuilding. And so I do have a passion around preventative maintenance, starting with self-awareness. What do I notice? What do I need? And then building a culture, of course, where people can raise their hand and say, hey, I need a break. I need a time over lunch to collect my thoughts, to step away. I mean, whatever it might be, just empowering people then to use that self-awareness to do that preventative maintenance. Dr. Emily Nagowski wrote a great book about burnout with her sister, and there's science in there that I love. I think the more we can just learn, we're people first. we're humans, and how does this human body work? It's just brilliant. It actually removes it from like, oh, that's kind of extra when I have time, fluffy stuff, to no, it's the body you live in. It's the state of being a human. So leverage that science to do what's right for yourself. And the rest takes care of itself.
Checking in, really kind of modeling that mindfulness and being proactive and preventative is really important there too. And giving people the time, the resources, just tools and guidance to make sure that they're thinking about this too is also helpful to that journey. You mentioned kind of redesigning and also the conversations we've been having around mental health, I would say over the past few years have been really accelerated because of the pandemic, which started in 2020 as well. And a lot of folks needed to kind of reset and do things live. How did you really hit the reset button for HR and people practices at the beginning of the pandemic? And, what are some of those results as we enter 2023 in a couple of months?
Yeah. So I feel like I got a running head start at the pandemic. And what I mean by that is fall 2019, I was in a really reflective period about my career where I was, what do I really love about HR? I need to remember why I'm drawn to this field and what my purpose is with the work. It was just in a season of those kinds of questions in the fall 2019. And so I undertook an 8-week mindfulness-based stress reduction class where, the instructor on the first day used this phrase, Christina, come home to yourself. And it was a beautiful 8-week experience. And that is a tool I brought in to my work and to our workplace in 2020, when the pandemic hit and we were all sort of dealing with and navigating that situation. And so 2020 fall, I started the current job I'm in and really felt, I have no other way to be as an HR leader at this particular point in time than one who, acknowledges people's humanity at work. And so back to mindfulness meditation and sort of, starting a meeting with that lens of like, come home to yourself, take a breath, simple practices around building self-awareness and managing stress response. We're definitely just right out of the gates, like that's how we're going to go right now, because people's worlds are really in a varied state. Everyone has a different experience about this, needs different things. And I think, what's most universal is just, let's be good to ourselves. Let's welcome in our humanity. And, again, I've said before, like the rest will take care of itself. I think one other way that I've shifted how I come to HR, particularly in the pandemic and influenced by the pandemic, is the way I look at, I would say, core HR processes. Let's talk about like performance management. A lot of times, if we asked like the average, worker too, it's like, how do you feel about it? Or how does this go? There's Gallup has great research right around, the dread or the disengagement that happens because this is a, annual process that can, spike anxiety or sort of discontent or, and it's about a tool. It's like, this is the form, or these are the questions, or here's the rating scale. And the way I've really shifted that, and the way we're talking about it at DermTech, even through this year, is it's humanity first, and here's the 3 ways I teach it. It's who are you as the leader? If we're talking about human performance and how performance goes in an organization, we're going to start with you as the leader, because humans have discretion around how much effort and energy I'm going to give to something. I get to choose. I'm not on an assembly line here where I've got that I have to produce this, or in some sort of machine output way. A human gets to choose. And so it starts with the heart of a leader. Who are you? How do you inspire people? How do you motivate? What's your energy that you bring to a room? That influences performance. That influences, especially in the pandemic, you have a varied audience, who's ever's on your team and what they're dealing with. You have to make sure you can map to each of those people and relate to them as a human being. That's the first step. Who are you as leader? Second is, what's the environment you create? And that's been harder with remote work or distributed teams. And, we're trying to create an environment where people feel connected and belong to something. That is no small task for leaders, but that environment matters. It's the atmosphere around you, what you see, again, up on the walls, or how your space looks, that influences performance. And then the third is the tool. The third is, the map, like what by when, what is our target, and how do we gauge success or progress? That's important. But 2/3, 1/3, 2/3, the human element, the environment you're creating, 1/3, the tool. And that would be just another example of a specific shift inspired by the pandemic, I think, to check or reevaluate, how I think about HR and the way we show up for the organization.
Absolutely. Showing up is not a one size fits all approach, kind of meeting the needs of everybody's kind of different career, where they are in life in general, and really being open minded and being able to be agile as well is also something that is, key to the company culture puzzle, to a people first approach to how do you really think about, empowering folks across the organization to practice that equity driven leadership and really speak up?
Yeah, I would go to our values, Christina. I worked with a cross-functional section of our folks through 2021 to articulate our organization's values. And in that, just based on who we are as an organization and what our purpose for being is, which is to lead the genomic revolution in skin health. We are a disruptor. We have a very innovative technology. So, as an example of those values, we created a value of disruptive innovation. Underneath that is challenging the status quo. Whatever you see is not all that exists. That's represented in our technology, but also in our culture and the way we're working to encourage people to, as you said, speak up, to challenge what they see. Another value is human impact. Agility is one of our values, and finally, resilience. And so I would just point to those values as a place where we're really working to connect those behaviors to those values and invite people to action. And again, explicitly in our values is that you've got to challenge what you see. We exist as a company because we don't default to the standard. And so we want that from our people as well.
Yeah, you want the values to be manifested across the organization, if it's your first day at a company or you're celebrating your anniversary there as well, and make sure that
Yes.
you have that framework to reference back to when making decisions or thinking about, the next step or next goal. I do want to ask kind of an industry perspective question too, in terms of, building trust. Like any relationship doesn't just happen because you will it to. It takes a lot of kind of work and cultivating. Some organizations say they have this quote unquote open door policy or environment. However, some folks may be hesitant to come to HR or people teams for a variety of different reasons. But what are kind of some methods you use to really build and cultivate that trust within DermTech and really encourage folks to not only, share negative or constructive things, or share positive feedback, ideas, and issues to HR people teams?
I will share, Christina, one of my favorite questions to be asked as an HR professional is when I say I work in HR, oftentimes the response is, "Ooh, what kind of HR are you?" And that's a very normal, common question I get. And what I read by that is, what can I say in front of you? How will I adapt who I am and how I show up based on what you tell me right now? Because if you're just that fun sort of, the development or maybe the hiring team or something like that, that's one thing. But woof, if you're some of this other branch of HR, the association, just like you said, is often like, I need to edit myself. And I tell you, I feel like this is a daily practice. Just as you said, I believe as well, it's built on a foundation of trust. And what one of my fiercest commitments is to find ways to humanize failure and mistakes that lead to learning. And I think that's just the most important thing we can do. If there's an orientation too much to right and wrong, and somehow I purport to know that, and there are some things, of course, that are inherent in HR where we do need to manage that way. And there is a lot that is in the gray and to be held with grace and with space for learning. And that's the only way we're going to get people to really crack open and just speak freely. Again, I sat at a table and we were doing introductions, and then I was like, after some amount of conversation and some various choice words, someone asked who I was. And when I said HR, they're like, "Oh no, why didn't someone tell me I was sitting next to HR?" Again, that's what I'm trying to break down and to again, just humanize. I would say one other thing I try to do is, again, just share vulnerably. As I go, I hope to inspire other people to go. I've made mistakes. I've learned good lessons. I've, had ups and downs just like anyone. And I think it's really important. And I lead my team with that notion of more human at work. We are going to support each other and be on this journey together of being real and open with each other. And let's also help build that culture where others can do the same and not have that very common fear of, oof, who invited HR?
I love that. I think that is a good kind of example of what people are thinking, whether they ask it, directly as you're talking about, or, they have it in the back of their mind. What can I say? What can I not say? and really leading by example too. Rachel, out of all of the things that we talked about today, is there anything that I didn't ask that you want to share with our listeners or underscore any key takeaways?
I would just say, it's a really unprecedented time. That's probably so often said now, Christina, by your guests. And I think the fact that we're here and we're having this conversation about reimagining culture just tells us that there is opportunity in front of us, and to challenge anything that doesn't feel most empowering or feel true or right anymore, I think is just a beautiful thing. I think there's room for innovation in how we think about work and the way work gets done. So, be brave about the questions you're asking. Find your tribe of other folks asking and challenging in similar ways. And I think we're inside of a movement. And if you feel that as well, again, just be bold and stay at it. I think we're creating some new and wonderful things.
Absolutely. Challenge. This is a huge opportunity to do things differently. Rachel, thank you so much for being on Reimagining Company Culture this afternoon.
Thanks, Christina. I really enjoyed speaking with you.
Thank you. And as a reminder for folks who are listening, at AllVoices, we really believe in both employees and employers being seen, heard, and understood. And know it's a requirement for the business to really succeed overall. Have a great rest of your day, everyone.